Here we go. Welcome to the Licensing and Public Protection Committee being held today, the 15th of February 2022 at 7 p.m. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and recorded for publication at a later date. May I also ask members, in order to avoid any confusion, that if they wish a vote to be held on any item, that they may please make me be aware of this at the appropriate time. Thank you. May I start by asking if there are any apologies or absence, or are there members any substitutions taking place this evening, please? That's a silence, that means no. Thank you. Part 1, licensing. Do any members wish to declare an interest in relation to licensing matters on the agenda? Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting can be found on pages 5 to pages 8 of your pack. Are members content that these can be taken as read? Thank you. That is approved. Thank you. There are no further licensing matters on the agenda, and so we'll now move to the public protection matters. Part 2, public protection. Do any members wish to declare an interest in any public protection matters on this agenda? Thank you. Moving to item 5, which can be found on pages 9 to pages 16 of your pack. This is in relation to proposed taxi fees and charges for 2022 to 2023. Matt Burton's not here. So Nesta, can you take us through the item, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So members received a report in relation to the proposed taxi fees and charges for the next financial year in November 2021. And following discussion, it was agreed that these would be sent out for consultation and advertisement in line with the regulations. So this report is to update following that consultation process, which happened between the 19th of November and 16th of December, and the advert which was placed in the Sentinel on the 19th of November. In respect of the consultation, copies were emailed to private hire operators, vehicle hire companies, the trade association, and also local licensing consults. During the consultation period, we received one response in relation to the proposed fees and charges, and that was to confirm that they would take the appropriate action in response to the proposed fees. No further comments were received at all in relation to the proposed fees and charges. On pages 10 to 11, there's a table, which is on table 3.1 in the report. And if I can draw members' attention to the proposed fees and charges, they're highlighted in bold in column D. Those are the fees that we're looking at approving or requesting your approval for tonight. You can see that we've included in column E the percentage increase or decrease in relation to those, and there's quite a lot of decreases, particularly in relation to the vehicle fees and charges. So I'm happy to take any questions, but the recommendation is per as the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do any members wish to speak on the item, please? Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very much. In column C, we've got proposed fees and charges 2021 to 2022. I'd just like to make members aware, we've already agreed column C figures last year. We just didn't implement them because of COVID. Is that correct, Esther?
I think in relation to last year's fees and charges, we didn't actually implement the increase. We kept to the previous year. So what we have at this moment in time is the fee and charge in column B is our current fee and charge, and the column D is the proposed. The column C wasn't implemented, but you can see that they're very aligned to what we are proposing for this year.
Thank you, Councillor Mokoczewski.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Nesta. I don't know if you were the author of it, by the way, but thank you for the report anyway. I think really as a kind of overriding comment, rather than picking out individual increases or decreases, I think one of the concerns, and we've spoke about it before many times at this committee, is about vehicles being licensed from other areas. And the issue about vehicles being licensed from other areas, it diminishes the control the authority has on regulation within the area. So, and you see that very much with taxis running around with Wolverhampton plates on. They might carry a plate on the back and not on the front, and you think, well, who's going to enforce any of that? Well, nobody is, are they? In truth, is the answer. So, I think the overriding question is in reviewing the fees and charges for taxi drivers, and I appreciate this is a difficult question, but do we foresee that to push more people out of the area into licenses such as Wolverhampton, or do we think that these proposed increases will maintain what we've got or win some drivers back? How do we see it as an authority? What's the overall picture? Or that's indeed if we've thought about that. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, the issue of cross-bordering, I think we discussed at the last committee, it's something, that is some of the driver's choice in relation to that, providing, if they're a private hire, providing the operator, the driver and the vehicle are licensed with the same authority, then that is something that they're entitled to do. I think we've also looked at other local authorities and their costs. They are pretty similar to where we're going. I think we can see this time that, we have made a significant decrease in terms of some of the vehicle charges. Some of those are going down by about 35% this year. And I think that will obviously help maintain, the level of taxi drivers we've got in the service. It's personal choice, unfortunately. People will go to the licensing authority that they want to be licensed with, where it is the most convenient for them. But hopefully these changes, and I think not having any comments back in relation to the fees and charges, show what the trade consider, the reasonableness of what's been proposed. So hopefully that will, endorse the position for the next year.
Thanks, Nesta. So I understand that, private hire drivers have the kind of autonomy to be licensed by who they want, but the reality of it is that's driven by cost, isn't it? So ultimately it's the price that will take them to wherever they go, if you like. So I guess in terms of comparing those tariffs, and I'll say Wolverhampton because that's where they go, how does this set of fees and charges compare?
I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I know we have looked at them. They're not that dissimilar. Sometimes it's quite difficult to compare like for like because there's additional add-on costs, for a test here or a, qualification here. Sometimes they're quite difficult to do that like for like comparison, but they're not significantly different than a lot of the other neighbouring authorities around.
Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A couple of points, really. First of all, these rises are over 2 years as opposed to 1 year, so you can split them all in half, really. That's one thing. Secondly, I think it's very significant that the only people who talked about it was Uber, and all they said was, "Thank you very much for asking us." And that was it. That was the only consultation, the only queries, the only interest, really. So I think that the taxi things was think it's all right. So I'm sure they would have let us know.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Do any other members wish to speak on this item, please? Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Could you elaborate on that? What Councillor Sweeney just asked the question. How many people got back to us? How many taxi drivers got back to us? No.
I can answer. In terms of the consultation, we had one response, and that was from Uber, who said thank you very much and confirmed that they would implement it. So we didn't have any objections to the the consultation or any further in support of it. We had the one response.
And is the taxi what's him going the what do you call it, the association going? Is that still, do we still in dialogue with them?
Yes, the consultation and proposed fees were sent out to the trade association, the operators, and also local licensing consultants. So it was quite wide ranging. It was also placed in the Sentinel, and there were copies available here and at Kidsgrove. So, it's quite wide reaching in terms of the consultation. And, we didn't have those responses on this occasion, whereas, in previous years, we have equally received them. So,
yeah, I think another couple of points, Mr. Chairman. The training, taxi drivers training, in a couple of cases, well, more than that, we have sat on subcommittees. The taxi drivers don't want to do that extra training, and is it financial or other? How do those fees reckon with other licensing authorities?
In terms
knowledge
of
training and
in terms of individual requirements for each local authority, obviously they're set through the council's own policy as to what they require. They're all pretty standardised. Most people do require a knowledge test, safeguarding training and everything else. In terms of the comparison of other fees, as I've said, the comparison is we're quite, equivalent to others in terms of the actual breakdown or a comparison. I don't have in front of me just at this moment in time, but when we have looked, we're quite in comparison to, to the other authorities.
Yeah, we're coming on to that. Just one other, probably wasn't for me really, one of the failure to attend for vehicle tests, we reduced that by 37%. What's the rationale around that? I think you'd have thought you'd have put it up to make sure they do come. We're wasting our time, we're wasting our engineers' time down at the garage.
Yeah, you'll see in relation to all the garage costs or the vehicle test costs, they've all reduced at a similar amount. So we have been in discussion with the garage in relation to that, and that's in response to what the trade have been saying to us. They've mentioned it in our previous policy consultation, so we've taken that on board, and we've been working with our own garage to see where we can make efficiencies and where we can reduce our costs accordingly. So that's why they've all been reduced at around the same rate.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do any of the members wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Councillor, would you like to turn your mic on, please?
Sorry. I'm looking at the proposed minutes, and as I use the taxis quite a bit, I usually have people commenting on how much it costs to have the vehicles repaired and plates and everything that's gone on. I'm quite pleased to see that it has been reduced significantly from £109 to £70, and there's been a vast reduction in a lot of it at the garage, which I think is what has lost us most of the taxis. The taxis have gone over to Wolverhampton because it's been cheaper for them to get it tested and everything else, and badges over there. That is what we've done. We've lost. If we lose any more, we won't have a taxi firm or a taxi rank because everybody will be doing Wolverhampton. So we'll lose a lot of revenue. So I'm glad that this is being proposed, and I hope that we take it on board because this is one way of keeping taxis in the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Can this be ratified as per the recommendation, or is a vote required?
Yes.
All in favour? Thank you. Now, moving to item 6, which can be found on pages 17 to 20 of your pack. These are tax conditionality checks for taxi drivers, operators and scrap metal dealers. Nesta, will you take us through the item, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report is to inform members of the new introduction of tax conditionality provisions, as Council has just mentioned, for all new and renewal applications for taxi drivers, private hire operators and scrap metal dealers. So in relation to tax conditionality, according to HMRC, and it is a move to convert people from a hidden economy, so it is all visible, and through that levelling up the playing field and compliance among business and regulated activities. So what this actually means for us, that these provisions are going to come in on the 4th of April this year, and it means that we have to do some additional checks during our taxi and scrap metal dealer applications. So what it will mean is that we'll need to conduct a real-time check that the applicant is registered for tax purposes for renewals, which is akin to what we do at this moment in time for a DVLA check. So they produce, they can go online, get a check code, and we can see that they are registered for tax purposes. And what we have to do if it's a new applicant in the first year is to signpost to HMRC to ensure that the applicant is aware of their tax responsibilities. And only when they certify that they have received that information can we progress with the application. That's the same that if we don't get a check code, again, we wouldn't be able to proceed with the application. So the report is really just to make members aware that there is this new requirement in terms of what we need to do during the application process for all those. It does vary slightly between a renewal and a new application, but it is to make sure that all the licensed people and businesses do actually go through the HMRC tax system. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do any members wish to speak on this item, please? No, that's absolutely fine. So can this item be ratified as per recommendation?
Lights on.
Sorry, Councillor Williams. Do
No problem, Mr. Chairman.
you want to press your button and turn your light off?
I'll press it, but the light's on, yeah.
Okay.
Do we inform the applicant to the check has been done? And also, would it be a good idea to keep a list of drivers who we know, if there is any, that come out of the industry, come off the taxi rank because of the notification to the tax authority? Yeah.
The applicant will know that there is the requirement for the tax check because they have to go online to actually make the application to give us the code so that we can link the two systems together. So they will be aware of that. In terms of notifications, if any licenses, are either not renewed, obviously that will go through because there were no further tax checks. If something is revoked during the period of the license, I'm not entirely certain if there's a duty for us to notify the tax office of that. But it may well be something as the system evolves. So it is at renewal and at initial application, but the drivers will have to be aware of it because they will have to have registered to enable us to do that check.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak on this? No, that's absolutely fine. Can this item be ratified as per the recommendation or is a vote required? All in favour? Thank you. Moving to item 7, this is in relation to a consultation on taxi policy amendment for the new driver criteria on pages 21 to 32 of your pack. Nesta, will you please take us through the report, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. So this is in relation to changes that have happened in relation to the taxi policy and in particular in terms of the Btec qualification. At this moment in time, our current taxi policy states that in addition to submitting an application form and the fee, the applicant also has to pass a Btec level qualification. It's a level 2 certificate or equivalent. Unfortunately, there aren't any Btec providers available locally at any local educational centres or training providers. So as a council, we need to now consider what is a suitable alternative to this provision, because drivers cannot now adhere to our own policy. So in relation to the policy, not only does it require the Btec, it also requires the passing of an approved disability equality training course, the council's knowledge test, and they also require to have a satisfactory level of conversation and written English. So in relation to most licensing authorities, most have now got their own taxi training provision as well. We've looked at those, and some of them are split between an individual specific training course or the knowledge test. So our knowledge test is quite detailed at this moment in time. So section 2.5 of the report goes through what the topics are in our knowledge test. So it currently covers the highway code, taxi legislation, the council's vehicle conditions and driver code of conduct, safeguarding and child sexual exploitation awareness, disability equality, local area knowledge, working out fares and giving change, and the understanding and testing of written English. So it is relatively comprehensive. So what we need to do is, because there's no Btec, we need to decide what would be a suitable alternative. That would obviously bring about the change in the policy. So we also need to consider how that could be brought about. So the policy is naturally reviewed every 5 years, and it can be formally reviewed at any time. There is provision in the policy to make minor changes without any consultation when there's a number of things. So it's to correct an admin error, when something is no longer possible or legal, and there is no foreseeable detrimental effect to anybody affected by the change. So there's a couple of things that we need to do, and in terms of the recommendations, they are phased in terms of the report. So the first one is that members are asked to note that there is currently no eligible, Btec qualification for new drivers. So that's to note that. The second one is that there's a couple of options, and the officer recommendation is B, that members determine whether or not the criteria should be removed entirely and therefore covered by our own knowledge test. And if that is the case, decide on a commencement date for that. There's obviously other options that we could retain the existing criteria, or we could determine an alternative that it could be replaced with. And then finally, members also need to determine whether or not consultation is required on the policy. And if you do decide consultation is required, the length of that consultation. In terms of officer's recommendation, we cannot see, if members agree that the knowledge test is a suitable alternative, that there would be any detrimental impact to any drivers, because it is actually reducing the requirements of what the drivers need to make an application. They already have to do the knowledge test, so it would actually be reducing their costs and also reducing the requirements. So if you go with the officer recommendation, I think it would have no detrimental impact and therefore wouldn't necessarily need the consultation period. Happy to go through any questions and go through those phases if that helps at all.
Thank you. Members content with the recommendation set out. Councillor Hutton, questions, and Councillor Leske next.
Thank you very much. Since the knowledge test came in, every committee that I've sat upon, members have praised the knowledge test, and I've been quite passionate about making sure that the knowledge test was taken by private hire and taxi drivers, which shows to me how important the knowledge test is to members. And I'm very happy to support option B, because we've got a good knowledge test. We consistently insist that private hire drivers take that when they come to subcommittee. So we've already got something better in place. And as you pointed out, it's to the driver's advantage, and members have all been incredibly supportive. So I would go with option B, effective immediately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chesky.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps I'm a bit confused, I don't know. So my understanding is that the Btec qualification is no longer available. So it's looking at an alternative. So the current status is that we do the Btec, we do the disability, and we do the knowledge. Okay. So the proposal is, or the preferred option is to not seek an alternative to the Btec and not do the disability, but just do the knowledge test.
No, the disability would remain.
Right.
Everything would remain except the Btec qualification. So a lot of what is covered in the knowledge test is also covered in the Btec, along with a lot of customer care. So, you know, there is the opportunity to obviously tweak the knowledge test if we felt it would be needed, but we're not reducing the other one. So the safeguarding is still needed, the disability is still needed. We're just saying that we would use the knowledge test as the substitute for the Btec qualification.
Okay, let me just come back, Chair. So just for the benefit really of members, what were the key elements of the Btec that, so in other words, the bits that we won't be doing anymore, if you know what I mean?
Having looked at the syllabus and asked a similar sort of question myself, the main elements are in terms of that customer care. And I think we do that because we look at the fares, we look at the journeys, we look at, you know, the disability, we look at the CSE, and we've got the conversational English. So I think the majority of it is most probably covered by our knowledge test. And in fact, the knowledge test most probably goes beyond because it covers the highway code, it covers our own individual policy and the conditions that the drivers go. So it's very bespoke to the requirements that the drivers in this area need to cover.
Thanks, Nesta, for the clarification. So really just to round up, and I think just members want the reassurance that what we're removing doesn't leave a gap that leaves, you know, a knowledge gap, and that it is adequately covered. And obviously by making the recommendation, you're suggesting that it's adequately covered.
I think the Btec has stood us in good stead. I think if it was still around, it would most probably be something, you know, that we would want, but it's not available. So we have to look at an alternative, and there isn't an equivalent alternative. I think the best alternative that we do have is our knowledge test. Like we say, if there's areas that, you know, through the subcommittees or through feedback, we find need additional information or tweaking, then we can make those changes to the knowledge test. But at this moment in time, I think our knowledge test is quite comprehensive and covers what we need to, and I think it's the best alternative given the situation.
Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. No, I'd support this entirely. It seems grossly unfair to penalise the taxi drivers. Not their fault the Btec's gone. And this seems a very good sort of compromise type thing. I also think, as it's not going to be detrimental to taxi drivers, we should do it straight away. As a bit, you know, we don't need to consult any. We'll just get on and get up and running. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are members content that the recommendation as set out in the report is accepted? Councillor Williams, are you raising your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can press the light on. Thank you.
Is there going to be a policy on this particular our test? Will that carry any weight in respect of an applicant saying, well, you know, this is ridiculous, this is something you've made up in a way, which we have, but is it, will it carry any weight like the Btec carries that weight, doesn't it? You know, the banner Btec, Newcastle test, will that carry weight? Will they get a letter or when they pass, or certificate or anything of that kind? Or you see what I'm getting from it?
So the Newcastle knowledge test isn't a nationally recognised qualification as a Btec is. You know, they're recognised nationally. But the situation that we have is because nobody can do a Btec locally, nobody can apply for as a new driver at this moment in time because they can't satisfy our own policy requirements. They can't, if somebody wants to come into the trade, they can't do a Btec. So therefore they can't become a taxi driver. So we have to make a change. And I think, you know, our knowledge test is most probably the best alternative and covers everything. It's quite wide ranging and covers everything that we need to for that. It wouldn't be recognised by other councils. So Stoke require their own knowledge test and Stafford require their own knowledge test. So they won't necessarily accept Newcastle's, but that would be something that if a driver ends up being licensed by somebody else, then they would have to go through their own procedure and adhere to their own policy.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Nesta, is there any difference between our knowledge test and the Btec test itself, or other than the fact that you said it's a level 2 qualification and it's I've got a Btec qualification?
I think in terms of study time and things like that, there's most probably quite a few differences because, you know, obviously in terms of Btecs, you know, there's a process to go through. In terms of our knowledge test, we cover those subject areas. So we do publish on the website directions about what our knowledge test covers, the areas that people need to look at. But it is a test, you know, they do have to come in, there's a mobile device and it's multiple choice. And then there's some, you know, requirement for conversational and then also written English in relation to that. So it isn't a Btec, you know, it isn't that, but it most probably covers all the key areas of training that the drivers need in the area.
Yes, it's just similar, but like I say, the Btec is a recognised qualification, whereas we won't offer that.
No, Newcastle's knowledge test was designed by Newcastle for Newcastle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heason.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that I think it's the best way forward that we've got as a council so that we're not disadvantaged by not having any new applicants. So I would like to second Councillor Hutton in the accepting the proposal as put forward.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Very much, Chair. I'd like to agree with everything that's just been said by my former colleagues. I think that we were duplicated, and if I remember rightly, as a council, we were trying to stop duplicating. So if Btec had got some of what we're already doing, you know, they're only asking them to pay for another test if it's being covered by our general knowledge. So, you know, why should they go out and pay for another test? And that is where we get questions asked. We've got to do this Btec, and yet we're doing it with the council anyway. So when you think about it, we were shooting ourselves in the foot and we were duplicating everything. So I agree that and I thoroughly recommend that we go with the proposals on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Are members content that the recommendation as set out in the report is accepted? All the hands in the air, please. Thank you. Noted. The next item is item 8 on your agenda in relation to public protection and is in closed session. This is to resolve that members of the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the report because it's likely that there will be a disclosure exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 7 in part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Can I please ask the officer to stop broadcasting and remove any members of the public?